Almost 3,000 alleged military coup supporters have been arrested, of course, after an attempt to overthrow President Erdogan's government failed this morning. Turkey's parliament will hold an emergency session later today. The Prime Minister has claimed that political parties are now set to discuss bringing back the death penalty for those behind the coup. He put the death toll at 161 people killed, including 20 organizers of the coup. However, earlier estimates from acting army chief Umit Dandar, who was appointed during the coup, were higher, listing 194 deaths, including 104 people described as coup plotters, also 41 police, 2 soldiers and 47 civilians. The Prime Minister added that all coup attempt participants in Turkey, including military and representatives of the Gulen movement, will be detained and punished. Meanwhile, thousands of Erdogan supporters took to the streets to resist the military coup attempt, and over 200 soldiers were seen surrendering as they abandoned their tanks and their military bases. Let's bring in Talat Massoud, now a retired 3-star general of the Pakistani Army. Thanks for joining us here on RT International today. The authorities in Ankara are now considering bringing back the death penalty. Any chances that might come back into force?
It's quite possible because this time I think they are going to be much harsher. And I think the president has also alluded to that in one of his statements, that this time we will really be very hard on them, whosoever has done this. So it's quite possible that they might pick a few people and then also, truly go for the death penalty.
Yunin here in the studio alongside Rory, General. One of the aspects here that is very interesting when you talk about the overall picture is that of the relations with the EU and Ankara. For a long time, Turkey had been edging towards the EU, trying to get membership. How do you believe that's going to affect the relations between the country and the continent?
Well, I think there is now a little chance for Turkey to get into EU, at least for the next few years, because as it is, there has been a lot of resistance against Turkey joining the EU. And with this sort of a coup taking place, I think those forces which were opposed to Turkey will get further hardened. Although the coup was not successful and the democratic forces were able to overcome and overpower the undemocratic forces, but yet I think they will use this excuse that Turkey is not a stable democracy, and the policies of Erdogan also have been challenged and questioned in the European Union for different reasons, and I think it would be somewhat premature to think that Turkey would be admitted in the EU.
Now, just if I can jump in very quickly here, many hours ago, ultimately midway through the attempted military coup, the President Erdogan, the Turkish president, came out blaming an Islamic cleric, Mr. Fethullah Gulen, of being behind this coup. Mr. Gulen lives in America. And although Erdogan has demanded many times his extradition to Turkey, Washington has never allowed that to happen. And now the Turkish Prime Minister says that the country that hides Mr. Gulen is no friend of Turkey's. He's referring to America now. How would that kind of comment affect relations with the United States? What's the future holding there?
Well, I think this is a very point of contention between US and Turkey, because they want Mr. Gulen to be back in Turkey. They want to try him. Even before this coup, they were wanting to try him. for instigating people against the state, and now they think that he is also responsible for the coup, although it's still doubtful as to whether he really played any role in that. Maybe his sympathies are with those who committed the, who are engaged in the coup, but it does not mean that he was necessarily involved in it. But yet they consider him as an enemy, and certainly this will be a sore point between the US and the Turkish government.
It's been a riotous past 12, 13 hours in Turkey. Scores of people dead, more arrested, lots injured. Turkey is already claiming that it's back to stability. Do you think the country is?
Well, I think the country has a lot of problems at the moment. Actually, what has happened is that Mr. Erdogan, although he is extremely popular amongst the poor and the middle class, but he has also pursued certain policies which are opposed by people, by the elite, as well as some very strong, persons in the establishment. And I think that has resulted in a lot of polarization within Turkey, which has not been good for Turkey. So I think this coup will probably help in trying to sort of and to give a chance to Mr. Erdogan to really see if there is a great possibility of his changing some of his policies and making him more moderate and modulate his policies. Because if he does not do that, then these divisions will continue and Turkey will not be able to progress the way that they want to.
We've been speaking to Talat Massoud, a retired three-star general of the Pakistani Army. Thanks for coming on RT International this hour, sir. Well, during the early stages of the coup, opposition troops took over the CNN Turk news channel, forcing their way into the building. I think we can take a look at the infiltrating, in other words, of the TV channel's offices. Now, the channel was taken off air for a short period, but CNN Turk has now resumed its broadcasting. Gunshots were first heard inside the studio while still on air, with a hostage situation then taking place inside a separate media group centre. The soldiers who took part in the raid on CNN Turk have now been detained by police in Istanbul, but only after anti-coup protesters flooded the studio.
Just a short time ago here on the program, amid all the breaking news coming out of Turkey, we spoke with freelance journalist Alaaddin Kilic.
This was one of the strange, very strange events that has happened in Istanbul over last 30 years. So yesterday evening, two bridges in Istanbul and many roads in Istanbul were blocked by the military officers and soldiers, telling people to go back their home. Their actual statement was, "This is not a joke. Go back to your homes." So in the beginning, people were thinking about this is a terrorist attack alert, and then it turned out to be an attempt to coup by the Turkish army. Then they have taken control of the Turkish state television channel TRT to make the TRT news presenter to read their statement as they have taken control over the country. In Istanbul and Ankara, we have seen violence and planes flying so low to scare the people, and sometimes gunfires to scare people, sometimes aiming to the air, sometimes aiming to the people. I was on the streets with people to report, and President Erdogan urged his own supporters to take the streets and protest against the military intervention. So I have seen a unity, not his own supporters, the supporters of the opposition parties as well. So people were united against this military intervention. So this was a quite unique moment in the country's history. My personal experiences while I was doing Lives with Arti was also remarkable, that when I was on the phone, I was able to hear planes flying so low to create immense noise. There were tanks and planes bombarding the parliament building as well as the National Intelligence Agency building, both in Ankara, killing people. And there were also killings at the presidential palace in Ankara as well. We also had killings at in Istanbul as well.
Well, the events in Ankara and Istanbul have not gone unnoticed by Turkey's neighbours and Western allies. That is yet another aspect to what we've been seeing over the past half a day. Our Middle East correspondent, Paula Sleer, can bring us up to date.
Well, I can definitely tell you that here in the Middle Eastern region, there is huge concern as the developments in Turkey gain momentum. The United States is amongst those that is hugely worried. It has a military base with nuclear weapons inside Turkey, and it uses this base to launch airstrikes against Islamic State. It is also one of 6 European NATO locations with nuclear weapons, and hence it's no surprise that the United States was very quick to rush to defend it. It issued a statement in which it spoke about Erdogan being the legitimate leader. It urged for calm and the avoidance of bloodshed. Turkey, of course, is hugely important, and any change in leadership in Turkey has real geopolitical ramifications for the relationship between Turkey, the Middle East, and the United States, for example. There are many countries here in the region that have gone on high alert. Greece has put its army in full combat readiness. Here in Israel, there have been no official statements as of yet that have been issued by political leaders, and I don't think there will be, because it isn't really to their advantage to come out in statements for or against President Erdogan. But of course, the situation is being closely monitored. The Israeli army is not in a state of high alert at this stage. And of course, it points to the fact that any kind of chaos in Turkey has the possibility of causing chaos further in the region, which ultimately, unfortunately, could open the floodgates to Islamic State. Most of the comments as of yet that have been issued by European leaders have been relatively restrained. We've heard comments that talk about the legitimacy of the democratically elected government. There are also comments and calls for the situation to remain calm and to avoid bloodshed. Donald Tusk, the European Council president, has said that the key question is what kind of Turkey will emerge from this crisis. He says, and I'm quoting, how Turkey deals with the consequences will be crucial not only for Turkey, but for the whole region and European Union-Turkey relations. And of course, that is a reference, well, one understands it to be, to European Union-Turkish membership talks. Now, we've also heard from the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, who has said that the United Nations is seeking to clarify the situation, and he is urging for calm. And again, those are the kind of comments we're getting from the international community, urging people to be cautious. We've heard, for example, from the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and other Russian officials for people to stay indoors until the uncertainty of the situation becomes clearer.
Well, we discussed the attempted coup with the editor of Pan-African Newswire, Abayomi Azikiwe, a little earlier.
It's essential for the United States and for the other Western European NATO states to keep Turkey as a major outpost of Western military power or Western political influence in the Middle East. Whether the military seizure of power, or whether it's junior military officers or a faction within the military, whether it succeeds or not, this still sends shockwaves, not only through Turkey, but through the entire NATO alliance. I mean, this shows the degree of instability and discontent and discord that is taking place now in Turkey. And also, you have the current turmoil that exists right now within the European Union. Even though Turkey is not an official member of the European Union, they want to join the European Union, but they are a very, very staunch member of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. They have the second largest military force within NATO. In reality, they are a major Western military outpost in the Middle East.
Turkey's government and army are known for having a special relationship. RT's Nikki Aaron now joins us live in the studio here to discuss that, and ultimately some are saying, how is that relationship now potentially going to change?
Well, the first thing to note is that this latest in a string of military coups is something that's been spanning the second half of the 20th century. We've seen numerous coups attempted, so this is nothing new. The Turkish military has long considered itself to be a guardian of the country's democracy. Indeed, it has a history of intervening to maintain secularism in the country, as favoured by Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, the former army officer and the man credited as the founder of the Republic of Turkey. But under President Erdogan's tenure, the military has lost significant power, and this personal relationship between Erdogan and the military spans back as far as Erdogan's political career. If we go back to 1997, the military took control of the country in what was famously labelled the postmodern coup. This was when the military was concerned about an increasing presence of political Islam in the country, and so they presented the government with recommendations which included closing many religious schools and banning the wearing of headscarves in universities. And at the time, Erdogan, he was the mayor of Istanbul, and he was actually sentenced to jail and banned from politics for 5 years after he read an Islamist poem in public. Fast forward to 2002, and by this point, Erdogan is the prime minister, and the military launches another attempted coup. This time, it was intercepted. A number of military officials were arrested for allegedly being part of a secret organization called the Ergenekon, which was already trying to overthrow Erdogan at this point. So you can see this relationship between Erdogan and the military is very long and very bitter. But the army really has been attempting and often successfully launching coups and trying to seize control of the government of modern Turkey long before Erdogan possibly even dreamt of having a political career. So let's take a look back at some of those attempts.
Turkey's first military coup happened in 1960. It happened after army officers got fed up with the ruling party promoting religion too much. The coup leader, a general, ended up becoming Turkey's president. 11 years later, in 1971, and the military are at it again. Coup number 2 takes place against a backdrop of a collapsing economy and left-wing strikes. The upshot, a change of prime minister and some behind-the-scenes military control, but ultimately just more political instability. This spiraled over the following decade and became increasingly violent, resulting in a third military putsch in 1980. Hundreds were killed and the coup leader becomes president. Fast forward to 1997 and you guessed it, it's coup time. Why? The Islamic Welfare Party had taken charge of the government and the army didn't like it. The party is shut down and former members, among them Erdogan, start a new one.
Now, in more recent years, as Erdogan's political power has grown, he's continued this vigorous crackdown on the military in a bid to consolidate power in Turkey. The most famous of these instances was just in 2013, the coup plot trials for the Ergenekon, that secret organization I told you about that came to light 11 years ago. And these trials saw many high-ranking army members, journalists and academics handed excessively long prison sentences, and in some cases aggravated life sentences, all because of their connections to this secret organization that's said to have masterminded this 2002 attempted coup, attempt to overthrow Erdogan in the process. Although later an appeals court overturned many of these convictions because prosecutors were unable to prove that this secret organization, the Ergenekon, actually existed. But these convictions of these prominent figures really dulled the respect that the military had in the country. Let's not forget the military was once considered the main power broker in modern Turkey. So I guess you could say that what Erdogan has successfully done to change this relationship between the government and the military is that he's tarnished the reputation of the military, which had previously been Turkey's most respected institution.
Okay, RT's Nikki Aaron bringing us right up to date with what would you call that? A tough history, wouldn't you, between President Erdogan and all those examples of coups going right down through the years with the military. Thank you very much for that. Okay, Middle East analyst Catherine Shakdam thinks that the overnight developments reflect a rift in Turkish society.
There was the big writing on the wall. I mean, Erdogan has really, run. I mean, the policy that he has run were really antagonizing not only to the military but to the greater public. And I think that he has promoted not the interests of Turkey but his own. And ultimately, he's paying the price for it. He has, driven very dangerous foreign policies over the past years, when usually Turkey is very intent on, making friends with its immediate neighbors. And in between the fallout with Russia and tension with Iran and its actions in Syria and the kind of policy that he has run by aiding and abetting terror, really catching up with him, I think, today. I mean, quite clearly. And I think that the military, I mean, whatever happens, made a really clear statement in that the country is not actually united at all, and that there's really deep political tension that needs to be addressed regardless of what happens today. Turkey could actually reinvent itself and become this bridge in between, the East and West that it was usually, usually occupy, in kind of the political makeup of the world. And it would be a good thing, to have Turkey back to being neutral, because we need to have some countries in the Middle East which are stable enough, big enough, with enough military power to be able to kind of, bring some sense into the situation. So it could be a good thing.